Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
We will rejoice in our affliction because affliction produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. That is Romans chapter 5, verse 3, and I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where you will find encouragement and community, as well as get equipped for your unique parenting journey. As a mom of 8, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adult sons, both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were little, I understand the unique challenges involved in raising kids with trauma histories and prenatal substance exposure. So I am here to link arms with you. We can walk together and support one another. Be sure to grab a copy of my newest book, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms, now available on Amazon. Thrilled that Jamie Finn from Foster the Family wrote the foreword in the book. And it is a devotional written by an adoptive mom for foster and adoptive moms. I know that we are busy, so there are 52 devotions, one each week. Packed with scriptures, breath prayers, journaling pages, and you can unpack and spend more time than just one day a week in it, but it's designed to not be overwhelming so that you can actually get through it. And of course, it is filled with just gorgeous illustrations, and all of it is designed to minister to your heart and refresh your spirit. So again, it is available on Amazon. And always, please take time to like or follow, leave a review of this podcast where you listen to it, as well as our social media pages on Instagram and on Facebook. I love to connect with you there and love to connect with you in person as always. I am booking speaking engagements for 2026. My next one is just right around the corner. I will be at the Renew Retreat for Foster and Adoptive Parents in Swansboro, North Carolina, April 30th through May 2nd. And then I don't have travel scheduled after that until September. I will be at the CAFO Summit in Atlanta, September 23rd through 25th. And the fall gets pretty busy. I'll also be at Replanted in October, but I am booking. So if you're interested in having me come and speak to your group, whether it be your support group, your church has a foster adoption ministry, maybe you work with an agency or an organization, maybe you just want to do a retreat for foster and adoptive moms, whatever it is, reach out to me. I would love to come. I travel. I can come in person, or we can schedule a training online for a group for FASD. So my email address is in the show notes. You can email me directly, and I check my own emails and I will get back to you. You can also email me if you have a question. I hear from a lot of listeners who have a question about FASD or other things related to adoption, but especially FASD because that's my area of expertise, I guess. And so feel free to reach out with a question, a comment, or just let me know what this podcast means to you. I always love to hear from you. Now, today we have a guest with us. We have Johanna Jones. Johanna has worked in the field of disability for over 20 years, serving as a post-secondary educator and also within the nonprofit sector. Recently, she authored a book, Inclusion: Building a Framework for Disability, which is a welcoming space that fosters connection and growth and builds upon established research, historical references, and biblical text that examine inclusion and its appeal. The book identifies inclusion as a framework for disability using the Gospel of Luke, where faith, affliction, and disability intersect. Johanna received her doctorate from Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, where she completed a mixed methods study that explored factors that impact special needs programming. Johanna's outreach and public service experience includes working as an FASD United affiliate, presenting information on FASD in the Alabama community and within the educational setting. She's a speaker with nonprofit organizations, schools, foster care workshops, and conferences in Alabama and throughout the U.S. Additionally, Johanna was awarded the FASD proclamation by the governor of Alabama, and she moderates the FASD Alabama Facebook page, which is a clearinghouse of information on FASD research. Please welcome to the show, Johanna Jones. Hey, Johanna.
Hey, how are you?
I am fine. I'm thrilled to finally have you on the podcast. I know we
Thank you, Sandra.
connected. Yeah, we connected some time ago through FASD United. We're both affiliates. And when I saw, that you were an affiliate in Alabama and I knew I was going to be going there, which I did back in, I think it was February, it was great to have a conversation with you. So I know our listeners are going to learn so much from you and your expertise. And as you know, we talked, our listeners are primarily foster and adoptive parents like me, many of us raising kids with disabilities, including FASD. So I would love to hear, that we would start with your journey. Like, tell us about your work in the disability community.
Okay. Well, my work spans for probably over 25 years in the field of disability, which encompasses post-secondary education, outreach, nonprofit, counseling, and special needs. So it's touched on different areas of disability in different venues as working with individuals and their families affected by disability.
Wow. And where did your passion come from for that? Because you've been doing it for a long time. You must love your work.
I do love my work. It's just, I think the Lord opens up doors for you. I think He opens up doors that He knows that He has put you in this place and this time for. He opens up doors, He closes doors, and it's just all God's plan to bring our gifts to others and also represent the opportunity to provide spiritual thinking and how it applies to the disability community.
Yeah, yeah, love that. So, and I'm curious, because you have a book coming out soon.
I
So you
do.
used
I
all of your
do.
expertise about that. So the title of the book is Inclusion, Building a Framework for
Absolutely.
Disability.
Here it
Oh,
is.
you've got one because
I've
it's
got one. I have it. Yeah, they're at the printer right now. So I
yeah.
do have one copy. So
Awesome. I know
yes,
what
I
that's like as
do.
an author to get that first copy in your
Uh,
hands. It's pretty exciting.
yes,
Yeah.
it makes it real, something
Yeah.
tangible. So I feel like that was the Lord's design. It was His timing, and it's a book about inclusion and disability, and it encompasses my areas of experience and disability. And it's a historical reference. It's also have biblical reference. It examines research and examines inclusion and identifies inclusion as the framework for disability. Because we know that according to the World Health Organization, that 1 billion people have a disability. A
Wow.
billion. That's from the World Health, they call it the WHO. And
Yeah.
then the Centers for Disease Control says that in its documented research, 1 in 4 adults have a disability. That's huge.
Yeah.
And then 1 in 31 have been identified on the autism spectrum disorder, and 1 in 32 newborns are born with conditions related to prenatal developmental issues. So the book focuses on disability and the importance of supporting individuals with a disability, and it represents a research and spiritual thinking behavior and how the Bible can link or has linked healing with inclusion, seeing Jesus breaking barriers and restoring people. So it discusses some research that we did in Alabama, and it was a selection of clergy, pastors, special needs coordinators. And so it was just, I know it was God's gift to me to finish the research. I know it was God's gift to the community to bring to light just the level of disability and how inclusion can be a framework for disability.
Yeah. So can you describe what that is exactly when you say inclusion, building a framework for disability?
Yeah, so inclusion examines the Gospel of Luke kind of in a way that factors in, that focuses on Jesus's ministry and the goodness of inclusion and the goodness of remembering that people with a disability are platforms for his experience to build in us a a world where disability can become an area that helps us to realize that we need him and our dependence on him, and he can help us overcome those barriers, of course, with support. So I hope that answered your question in a roundabout way, but it's basically it's a people with disabilities can be our a messenger to use kind of use the power of weakness
Mhm.
to display God's strength if we call on him and if we believe in him. And sometimes it makes unbelievers know that we serve a living God when something happens as a result of his power and his strength.
Yeah, that is wonderful. So who would be the your target audience for the book?
It would be families affected by disability. It would be individuals affected by disability. It would be for clergy, for church, staff, and it would also be for schools, for
Mhm.
businesses, anybody where disability touches them personally or professionally. And as we know, 1 billion people have a disability. So and 1 in 4 adults have a disability, and that's from the CDC. So it focuses on disability, but also the importance of supporting neurodivergent individuals and linking kind of spiritual thinking and behavior and healing with inclusion, showing that Jesus breaking barriers, restoring people. And again, it's research done in Alabama with clergy, special needs ministry, pastors. So again, I hope that's a
Yeah.
question that was answered
Yeah. No, you're doing
in using. Mhm.
yeah, you're doing great. Could you give us like an example of application? Like we read the book and what would somebody learn? What would they be able to apply?
I think one thing that they can apply is that utilizing Romans 5:3 because I think it advocates for individuals to take challenges and process them so that it leads to hope. It leads to a process that uses despair and describes progression. It describes endurance. It produces character, and character produces hope. So I think if there's a lot of ways that the book brings home, siblings that might be affected with having a disability in the family. What's the research behind that? And they have a very empath. The outcome for them is they're within their family they don't have problems, but a lot of times in the community they might get stares as a sibling. So it brings to kind of talking points for children that have a disability, families that are faced with disability, to include siblings, and just a way to use disability to examine inclusion as a framework for disability. So that just focuses on disability, the people who read it, the way that research has presented itself in the book is very hopeful. The way that scripture is presented in the book is very hopeful. Case studies that are presented, it's very hopeful. So the reader can take from it the message of hope and the good news of the scripture, and using disability and inclusion to focus on increased capabilities, increased ability.
Oh, I love that. So, can you explain a little bit more about how you use the Gospel of Luke as a framework for the book?
Okay. So the Gospel of Luke, it focuses on Jesus's ministry. It focuses on inclusion. And so people with disabilities and in the Bible, people with disabilities are to use uh, disability as a platform for his power to use weakness and display strength, and to embrace people with disabilities as messengers for our need for God and our need for one another.
Yeah.
So in the Gospel of Luke, it does have a lot of examples of how Jesus had relationships with people with disabilities. And because they could not necessarily repay him, but through the experience of having befriending them as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love
Hmm.
that. Love that. So, Johanna, our listeners, like me, are foster and adopted parents, and many are raising children and teens who, not only may have a disability, but who were prenatally exposed to substances, including alcohol. Many of us do have kids with FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and I know this is an area of expertise for you as well. So, how did you come to learn about FASD?
Well, I had never heard of FASD until I was asked to write a paper on a disorder that affects children academically and behaviorally. And I came upon FASD, and this was probably 2013. I was finishing up a paper. I it was just, it was so interesting and thought it affects, and I had worked in the field of counseling and guidance and worked with children and worked with adults and worked in areas where there was suffering and homelessness. And I thought, wow, this is a disorder that affects all these areas. And so I wrote the paper, and my instructor, she loved it. She said I ought to present it. And then I presented it at a conference in Biloxi. And from there, it just took off. It's 2013, but it's just taken off. And so the Lord has guided me in different areas where FASD is prevalent, and it gives you kind of like it gives you a process that makes individuals hopeful. This is what it is,
Mhm.
and this is what we can do. Strategies, behaviors, and most identification of it as well. So it affects in the foster care, it affects those incarcerated. We know there's an incidence of FASD in the prison population. We know, and they didn't, of course, have the supports possibly that they needed. It and it just affects in so many ways and so many areas that we need to look at. And it's to me, it's very interesting how FASD came into my life, and it's just been, I have just stayed on that wagon, the FASD wagon, since 2013. It's just the Lord has opened up so many doors and opportunities that I'm thankful for,
Yeah.
and platforms as well.
Yeah, I've been on the FASD wagon for an awfully long time,
Yeah.
not knowing it for many years until
Uh-huh.
our youngest two that we adopted, they were 6 and 8. They're now
Mhm.
20. They're going to be 21 and 23, but they were diagnosed. We
Mhm.
adopted them from Eastern Europe, and they were diagnosed with FAS when they were little.
Mhm.
And then, but we got no information about it. We got a
Mhm.
diagnosis, and then there was nothing after
Mhm.
that. And then, as years went on, and started learning
Mhm.
about, I read Dr. Karen Purvis's book, The Connected Child, and started learning
Mhm.
about the impacts of trauma and applied, the connected parenting type principles
Mhm.
that helped. And I started to realize that some
Mhm.
of our older kids who didn't have a diagnosis and didn't necessarily
Mhm.
have you know, they had challenging behaviors, but not as challenging as our younger two. But as I began to learn about FASD and realized, gosh, probably a couple of our other kids were exposed on some level as well. We just didn't know that that was what was going on. So it's been a very long time, and and learning about it was a progression because there was like diagnosis and then there was nothing. I mean, I read some
Mhm.
books here and there, but there wasn't really a whole lot out there that was helpful. It was mostly
Mhm.
hopeless kind of information, it left me
Right.
feeling hopeless. And then in around 2020, I then finally found some good resources and then eventually
Mhm.
went on and got professional training because for my own family, to help my own family. And then the more I
Mhm.
learned, the more I started talking about it on this podcast. And then I
Mhm.
started hearing from our listeners who began to learn, oh my gosh, you just described my child. You
Mhm.
just described. So, people were reaching out with questions and just wanted to say that I learned about this on your podcast, and now my child just got diagnosed. So,
Mhm.
once you learn, I find that it becomes a passion because it's
Mhm.
so prevalent.
Mhm.
1 in 20, right? It's 1 in 20 school-age children in the United States
Right.
has been prenatally exposed. There's still a lot of misinformation out there about
Mhm.
if a birth mother, is it safe to have a glass of wine now and again and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And there's no safe amount that we know of. So,
Mhm.
but there is a high prevalence, especially like you said, among the population of children in foster and adoptive placements, especially, but at least one child in every
Mhm.
classroom in the United States
Mhm.
has an FASD, most likely not diagnosed. So it's become a
Mhm.
passion of mine too. Um,
Mhm.
and I know you're an advocate and a trainer. You train on FASD. So tell us about your work as an FASD advocate and trainer. What do you do?
Well, yeah, it is part of my fabric, and people will reach out to me. I just presented at the Alabama Department of Mental Health. Professionals will reach out to me or people interested in learning about FASD, and I'll present a PowerPoint, which is about 35 slides. And when I leave or as I'm there, people people are have never heard of it, have never
Mhm.
heard of FASD.
Yeah.
And so I present at nonprofits, I presented at schools. So, for example, a mom reached out to me and felt like her child, teachers and administration didn't really understand FASD and had never heard of it, in which they hadn't. So I presented a PowerPoint FASD. I presented in Alabama. I presented outside of Alabama on FASD, just anywhere where this population is affected. And
Mhm.
so that is, uh, I have also FASD Alabama webpage. It's kind of a clearinghouse for information. In 2013, I found the FASD proclamation, which identifies Alabama as a state where FASD is prevalent. It's an unknown disorder. So just anywhere people reach out and I'll present information. It'll all be in a PowerPoint and ask questions. And then they can refer back to my Facebook page, which is FASD Alabama. And I'm always putting up-to-date information, research from that, from our FASD affiliate office. So it's information and research that's updated, and it's true research in the terms of, it's been proven. We don't want to put information, like you said, misinformation on FASD. So I try to just give visibility to FASD in Alabama.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community.
So, Johanna, so many children with FASD really struggle in school. Parents are struggling because their kids are struggling in school. We're trying to learn everything we can about FASD, and it always seems like the educators, the school administrators, like nobody knows. You said that a little bit ago, right? And it's like seems like nobody knows about this, but it's so prevalent. So the burden falls on parents to advocate for our kids, to educate the educators. And you've spent years in the education system and in disability space. So what can you tell us about FASD and education? Like why is it so hard for our kids in school, and what can parents do?
Okay. So what I can tell you is students with FASD, they have challenges and they require sort of a strength-based approach. And there's a lot of repetition because alcohol, it's kind of, I compare it to a piece of Swiss cheese. A Swiss cheese has little holes in it. So that's what happens to children with FASD because of the prenatal alcohol exposure. Information goes in and goes out. We know now, though, that plasticity is something that we can build through a strength training mode for the individual with FASD. And so that means just be open to the idea that this is what it possibly is, the school system. And it gives you a sense of, hey, I can understand this child. Their disability is not caused by something that they're doing. They're not being children of rebellion as much as they are as children who don't understand context clues. Sometimes choices are difficult because that plasticity in the brain is not what a neurotypical child might be because there has been alcohol exposure. So I think teachers and administration can understand this disability is not caused by the child, but by prenatal exposure, and not to blame or shame, because like we say in FASD Alabama, pregnancies are unplanned. Women don't find out they're pregnant sometimes till eighth and even ninth month. And then some doctors have said it's okay in the past, maybe not recently, it's okay. So if we go with the thought that this children that are affected by FASD, they're trying harder by understanding that they do have some roadblocks. And if the teacher or administration will try harder with them, it is the hope that it will be a good outcome, and it'll be a process that leads to hope, and it'll be a process that takes despair and leads to progression. And so, with kind of the idea of make and break a connection, it becomes an experience. Repeat, 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 and just know that that's some of the things that I guess in answering your question, what FASD educators should know, or how should parents advocate. I actually had a parent reach out to me, and she said that her child has FASD and that would I come to the school. So I went to the school and did a PowerPoint for the administrators and the teachers, and the outcome for that was that the parents knew that the child's behavior was as a result of prenatal alcohol exposure. Because what we know now is a result of high-powered microscopes. What I always, when I present my information, I use a picture of a rat pup that has been exposed to alcohol, and we can actually see the changes in the dysmorphology and the facial features. So that gives it a concrete look, something that people can see and people can understand. The PowerPoint that the administrators and the teachers saw, it's concrete because we know we use rat pups as high-powered microscopes, and that's just really in the past, I would say 10, 15 years that we have those high-powered microscopes. And so we've basically given the rat pup FASD. And so we can actually see the alcohol change the facial features, the size of the rat pup from the exposure.
Wow. And the brain being changed.
And the brain change, absolutely. So again, it's just what I can tell you is that students with FASD, they have challenges. That's where you can go to my website or my FASD Alabama, and it talks about things that educators can do to help understand FASD and what are some accommodations that you can give to the child. It's sort of like we need glasses to see, so that's our accommodation. So
Right.
let's think about, what are some environments that a teacher or administrator can give to a child with FASD. And I love presenting that information because, again, it gives us hope through suffering, and the suffering produces endurance. And again, that goes back to Romans 5:3. Endurance produces character, and then character produces hope. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm sure our listeners are all, leaning in because we all, how often does the school call? Like every week, right? It's
Mhm,
always, seems like it's always
mhm,
a battle.
mhm,
And sometimes parents don't know if FASD is what's, driving the bus, so to speak. Then
mhm,
sometimes we find out, or there is a diagnosis,
mhm,
and the school still doesn't understand.
mhm.
And there's so much misinformation out there. I had one
Oh,
mom, her teen son who she adopted through foster care when he was little. She highly suspected FASD as she began to learn about it.
mhm,
And her son was really struggling in high school. And in
mhm.
an IEP meeting, she brought it up, and one of the educators in the room said, "Oh, well, that can only be diagnosed at birth. So clearly it's not that." And it's like, that is not true. Um,
Absolutely.
so there's a lot of misinformation. So unfortunately, it puts the burden on the parent to
Mhm,
learn and then turn around and then educate the educator. So we
mhm,
have to do that. And
mhm,
it's important to do because it does look like, we call FASD an invisible disability.
mhm,
Well, sometimes there are facial features. Most of the time, there are no facial features,
mhm.
but the brain has been affected. So there are
Right.
learning disabilities and challenges with language and communication and
Mhm,
impulsivity and
mhm,
memory and all of those things that
mhm,
make it difficult, but it looks like
mhm.
defiance or laziness,
Right.
willful
Right.
disobedience, and all of those things. And so the kid is getting punished,
Mhm,
consequences, all of the things, and they become increasingly frustrated and aggravated themselves because it's not
mhm,
that they're on purpose not doing what they're supposed to do or
mhm,
doing things they shouldn't. They're having a really hard time. And
mhm,
they need support and accommodations. And like you said, strengths-based support and accommodations, super, super
mhm,
important. So
mhm,
I always tell parents, learn everything that you can, and then,
mhm,
with respect, educate the educators. And I too, I get calls
mhm,
from, parents locally in my state that, would you talk to the school? Would you train the staff? Because you can,
mhm,
and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding that if your child does have a diagnosis of an FASD and they have an IEP, it can be requested that educators receive training on FASD because that
mhm.
is what the child's diagnosis is. So can a parent request that? Is that a requirement?
I think with FASD, I know in the state of Alabama, we have very few diagnostic clinics.
Mhm.
So, in answering your question, I think with the IEP, I think if you can look at the diagnosis as a need for support in any way, and I used and the DSM, I believe now has fetal alcohol, so it would fall into the school system as the diagnosis. But one problem that we have in Alabama, we don't have a diagnostic clinic. And so that really takes away from student being diagnosis. And I think with the school system, they have remedial support, help, and because FASD can be also an invisible disability and it mimics other things, then I think what we have to do is say they need extra support. If they do have a diagnosis, that's even better. But in Alabama, we don't have a diagnosis clinic, and FASD is a sort of a masquerader for other disorders, and that, you have the primary disorder or, which is fetal alcohol, and then that as a result, secondary problems occur, which
Right.
is problems related to behavior and academic. And so with the school systems, the biggest takeaway is that you know, to look at FASD as just the need for support.
Yeah, I know my boys, so here in New York, it's not
Mhm.
recognized either as a
Mhm.
diagnosis, although my boys are diagnosed. They were
Mhm.
diagnosed by a developmental pediatrician.
Mhm.
Um, it was easy for us to get that diagnosis for a few reasons, and one being they had the facial features and all
Mhm.
the other criteria, but
Mhm.
also we adopted them internationally. So
Mhm.
doctors really don't like to diagnose this, especially if
Mhm.
there's a birth mom in the picture, because nobody wants to shame a birth mom,
Right.
of course, but because they were adopted internationally, it was
Mhm.
like there was no birth mom in the picture
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
we got that diagnosis, but got nothing beyond that. However,
Mhm.
on their IEP, they were listed as other health impaired because
Mhm.
FASD wasn't recognized. And one of my boys has a lower IQ that,
Mhm.
more recently in his teens qualified him for, intellectual disability diagnosis. So
Mhm.
they got
Mhm.
supports and services and help
Mhm.
in school and on their IEP because clearly their testing and their history and, and
Mhm.
I always, because they did have the FASD diagnosis, I presented that all the time. So, so
Mhm.
when a teacher said to me, at a
Mhm.
parent teacher conference, oh, your son has a problem with impulse
Mhm.
control,
Mhm.
kind of like looking down her nose, I was like,
Mhm.
well, that is a
Right.
primary symptom of FASD. So
Yes.
that's not going to really go away.
Yes.
So it's educating the educators, which it makes it
Mhm.
really challenging, but they need
Mhm.
support in all of those
Mhm.
areas. So as parents learn and can understand what the symptoms of FASD are, what particular characteristic their child presents with, and what
Mhm.
accommodations could help, that's what they can be advocating for. So it
Mhm.
really does start with parents to get educated,
Mhm.
and starts there. So um,
Right.
it is a battle all the time.
Yes, just the need for support, and it's like we mentioned, a strength based approach, and helping parents advocate like you did, I think is a um, prime example of how parents can advocate, because the schools may not know about FASD.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my son's in high school, his teacher said to me, "Oh, I think this is the first student I've ever had with FASD." And she's a special education teacher. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She just didn't know.
Yes, such a great point. Such a
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah. And it often, it does, in our support group, all of the kids that represented by the parents in our support group all have FASD. Not everybody's diagnosed, but most of them are.
Hmm.
They all also have an ADHD diagnosis, and
Hmm.
probably about 80% of the kids also have an autism diagnosis.
Hmm.
And because it can look very similar, the symptoms.
Hmm.
But, and I also know parents who, out of desperation, accepted an autism diagnosis, confident their child did not have autism or does not have autism. However, it was the only way to get services and supports for their child. So,
Hmm.
we have to do what we have to do. But
Hmm.
it's so important to know the truth about this is what's really going on. It is FASD. This is what it is. This is how it affects the child and their brain. And this is
Hmm.
how we can support them.
Oh,
Uh,
those are great points.
yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, so good. So let's move on because I know you've mentioned Romans 5:3.
Hmm.
I'll read it again for our
Okay.
listeners. We opened
Okay.
with it, and I just want to unpack it a little bit because you chose the verse,
I did.
and I really want to hear what it means to you. But is we will rejoice in our affliction because affliction produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And I know our listeners are
Hmm.
clinging to the need for hope. Um, and I may have read it in a different version than what you're familiar with because I'm not sure which one I pulled it from. But um, why did you choose Romans 5:3?
Well, because it frames school challenges, whether academic or behavior, as a process, and a process that leads to hope rather than despair.
Mhm.
It leads to progression. It improves our outlet and thinking that suffering produces endurance and endurance produces character.
Yeah.
And that is the word of hope and
Mhm.
the good news of the Bible and the good news of God's presence in our life. We need Him,
Yeah.
and it will help us. Sort of, it's to me, it's like a roadmap, and to see schools, to see struggle maybe as a tool, and to
Mhm.
see maybe building children's resilience. I think building resilience is so important because it encourages a move from the actual problem to more of a mindset of growth, mindset of endurance. And so scripture helps us, including Romans 5:3, understand that affliction is a process,
Mhm.
disability is common, but it's important to realize that we can overcome and we can provide support and we can grow and we can endure.
Yeah. Amen to that, right?
Yes, yes.
So, Johanna, as we wrap up, would
Mhm,
you share some words of encouragement, some
mhm,
advice for our foster and adoptive
mhm.
parents listening?
Absolutely. So I was thinking last night about that question, and I think if I were to if it's okay, I might read it because I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
I think we have to think about disability as something that's been documented in people who have changed society. Historians have said that Einstein was slow to talk. Beethoven lost his hearing at 25. Of course, we know about Helen Keller, and of course, we know about Louis Braille. All individuals who changed society and made an impact.
Mm.
Um, Thomas Edison, he lost his hearing at 12 years of age, completely in one and a lot in the other. And that helped him focus on his work. And so those individuals, according to historians, had a disability, but they were disciplined. And I think we got to look at that they were disciplined, just like Romans 5:3 said, and they clearly endured. And also, it's important that parents and children realize and remember that disability should be in no way diminish an individual's contribution to society. And people with a disability are platforms for God's power to use weakness to display His strength and
Mm.
to remind us of our need for God and our reminder for us to need each other. So I think the power of God is manifested through suffering. And I think
Mm.
that as the Bible links healing to inclusion, showing Jesus breaking barriers, I would like to encourage those listening and foster and adoptive parents by letting them know that whether their child's disability is diagnosed or undiagnosed, explained, unexplained, expected, unexpected, that we must look at, it is my hope, we must look at the message to rely on God
Mhm.
and that you belong to the Most High. Your child belongs to the Most High, and that you're not weak, okay, and that keep pressing on, and you are not fighting this alone.
Mm.
So I think I didn't want to miss anything in the words that I felt like the Lord was giving me that you're not fighting alone.
Mm.
We may have to learn how to do things differently,
Yeah.
but we can experience, the Holy Spirit through it all. We can't see the Holy Spirit at work, but we can feel it and we know it's there. And
Yeah.
that encompasses maybe our belief in a more steady way. We have to believe faith. We have to believe in faith, even though we can't see it. We got to believe that we're not fighting this alone, that we serve a living God.
Yeah. Love that. Amen again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Johanna, what is your website for our listeners who might want to go there and learn more?
Okay. You can just go to the Facebook page,
Okay.
FASD Alabama. That's where I update research, strategies, school strategies, behavior strategies, also opportunities from as being a FASD affiliate there's information on that. And so opportunities to be part of maybe a study. And the research that I put on there is it's not stuff, it's stuff that's real research. I never want to put information out there that's not true. So I try to update it weekly with information that I get through different portals. So FASD Alabama.
On Facebook.
Yes, they can go to Facebook.
Wonderful. So we'll include a link in the show notes so that our listeners can remember and click there to go. So Johanna, thank you for all that you are doing on behalf of the FASD community and in Alabama and across the country. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I feel like you do such great work and are doing such great work that it was such an honor and a privilege to be invited by you. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for being here. And I look forward to getting a copy of your book when it releases.
Absolutely. It'll be ready the end of this month, and there'll be you can reach it through Rocky Heights. There'll be a link. It's $10, which is less than a meal, because I wanted everyone to get it. It's a book that encompasses research and spirituality, and just hopefully a hopeful avenue of inclusion and disability.
Yeah, I love that. And then if we follow your Facebook page, you'll probably be announcing it there as well.
Absolutely. There'll be a link. Link as well.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again. It was wonderful having you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandra. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey today. I hope you were inspired and encouraged and learned some things by my conversation with Johanna Jones. In addition to inspiring and encouraging you through this podcast, don't forget we have those resources to equip you for your parenting journey. We have the Hope for the FASD Journey online support group. I offer parent coaching on FASD, as well as online and in-person FASD training. So always check our website where you can learn the schedule for upcoming trainings. Every month I do a free 1-hour intro to FASD, and I also offer a Wired Differently, a more in-depth workshop. So different times, different days. So check out our schedule, our calendar, so that you can know when those are available if you are interested. Again, subscribe to this podcast and let your fellow foster and adoption friends know so that they can listen and be encouraged and equipped too. Thank you again. I'm so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.